want to welcome everyone to the 7th Annual State of African Small Business Issues Forum. This year, the forum will focus on closing the access to capital gap. I'm Congressman Donald Payne Jr. from New Jersey's 10th District. Today, our panel will discuss how African American businesses can get more access to the critical capital necessary to start and expand their business. If we can grow our African American businesses, we will increase the wealth in our communities. I want to thank Jill Johnson, CEO of the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership, for moderating today's discussion. And I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. Tanya Vancourt, founder and CEO of Goal Setters. Janique Drusis, Vice President of Global Philanthropy at JP Morgan. Kim Folsom, founder, chairperson, and CEO of Founders First Capital Partners. Sharon Reynolds, founder and president and CEO of Devmar Products, LLC. And Willis Wilson, portfolio manager for ICA Inc. They're going to discuss how we can improve the ability of African American businesses to obtain capital investments. We know there are several great ideas for products and small businesses in our minority communities. Before the pandemic, I visited a few of them at a small business incubator in my congressional district. One of my cities had taken shipping containers and turned them on their sides and made small business areas for these growing businesses. Then it turned the sections into small business centers for local entrepreneurs. The incubator is a great example of how business development can thrive when we work together as a community. But these businesses cannot grow without funding. Many large financial institutions say they want to help minority businesses, but too many of them fail to support their words with actions. Take Chicago, for example. The city is predominantly African American, yet one of America's leading financial institutions does more lending in the mostly white Lincoln Park neighborhood than it does the rest of the city combined. When African American entrepreneurs do get loans, they are charged higher fees than their white entrepreneurs are. Yet, this reluctance to invest in Black businesses has no basis in reality. In fact, a Commerce Department study found that minority-owned businesses create well-paying jobs, grow faster than non-minority businesses, and serve as anchors in their communities. They are worthy of more financial investment, much, much more. But many of them will not survive without the funding. Part of this discrimination has to do with how loans are determined. Too many institutions use credit scores and credit limits to determine who is eligible or who is not. These measures hinder African American entrepreneurs who might not have the scores or limits high enough to qualify for their loans. Instead, banks and lending institutions should base their loans on credit and payment history. Then African Americans with lower credit scores but higher repayment histories can get funding. This is just one of the many ways we can help small businesses become medium and large businesses. Our panelists are experts in how we can open doors for our entrepreneurs to get this funding. and also how that growth could be the key to increase wealth in Black communities. In Congress, I'm fighting for policies that support them every day. Policies like fair taxation, policies like eliminating loan discrimination, and policies that create disadvantaged business enterprise programs to help minority businesses get government contracts. But the best thing we can do for our minority businesses is to mentor and support them on our own. The people on this panel and the people watching this forum are some of the most successful African Americans in the country. There is an education you received outside of the classroom that helps you succeed. That knowledge is a resource that could help the next urban high school student become the next Oprah Winfrey or become the next Robert Smith. We need to encourage African Americans to pursue and achieve their small business dreams. Then we need to offer them the educational and financial support to achieve them. But now I know our panelists have more to say on how to increase access to capital. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jill Johnson, our moderator. Thank you very much.
Congressman Payne, thank you so much. Always glad to be here, and thank you for having me again. My name is Jill Johnson, and I describe myself as a change agent, a problem solver, and an optimist, which you have to be to tackle issues like this. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of the Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership. I am honored to serve as a moderator for the 7th annual State of African American Small Businesses. Our theme for this year is Closing the Access to Capital Gap, a call to action. What does that mean, a call to action? That means we're going to talk about doing. This issue forum will focus on what we must do now to advance the conversation about building Black wealth through closing the access to capital gap. As a community, we have talked about these problems and danced around solutions for decades. Now is the time for change, and we must come together to act. Our time is short today, so let's get right into it. As the Congressman said, we have an amazing panel with us. These are folks, they are not just some of the most talented and innovative and insightful people as African Americans. I would argue, period, bar none. So I'd like to have us start off with each of you introducing yourself in just a few sentences. And why don't we get started with you, Janique?
Well, Jill, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Janique Druces, and I lead the philanthropic efforts for JP Morgan Chase in the Northeast. Very glad to be here today to be a part of this conversation. The only thing that I'll say at this point in time is that this topic is very near and dear to JP Morgan Chase and something that we've been working on for quite some time. When we focus on philanthropic efforts, we really talk about inclusive economic growth, and this is a part of inclusive economic growth. But not only is it about philanthropy, it is also about our core business and what we're doing to support inclusive economic growth all the way throughout.
Thank you. Kim.
Good afternoon, and thanks so much for including me in this impactful discussion. My name's Kim Folsom. I'm the founder, chairperson, and CEO of Founders First Capital Partners and Founders First CDC. I started Founders First, an accelerator one focused on diverse founder-led businesses to help grow them to be mid-market companies. After funding and growing and launching my own 6 tech companies for the past 25 years, and did not see a significant amount of folks that look like me raising capital to be able to run companies north of 10 million annual revenues. And while there's been so many initiatives to change this in the last 25 years, not enough that have made a significant difference. I thought that my entrepreneurial journey would make a difference, and that's what that led me to launching Founders First 6 years ago. And I'm excited because we have a mission to grow and fund hundreds of businesses on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. And Sharon Reynolds.
Hello, Jill, and thank you, Congressman Payne, for this wonderful opportunity. I'm Sharon Reynolds, President and CEO of several companies, one of which is DevMar Products, where we eradicate pathogens where we live, work, and play. I've also launched DevMar Global Healthcare Solutions, where we provide commercially human donor milk to micropreemie and infants, at-risk infants in NICUs across the United States. I've launched DevMar Manufacturing for products that we distribute that are EPA and regulatory compliance laws with the FDA. And then finally, I launched Bryla J. Couture Clothiers as a way to give back to the community and to give back to foundations for at-risk infants. Thank you.
A serial entrepreneur for sure. And now let's take it to Tanya Vancourt, who was with us last year as we had this conversation. And Tanya, don't talk about where you are today versus where you were last year. We will get to that, but just your introduction. Thanks.
Jill, you know me all too well. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and very grateful that Congressman Payne and Jill, you have invited us all to be on this panel. I know that there are thousands of entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs, who could be here because there's so many people doing great work. So excited to be selected. Tanya Vancourt, CEO and founder of GoalSetter. GoalSetter is a savings, financial education, smart debit card, and soon to be investment platform for kids and families. We know that in order to close the wealth gap, we have to make sure that we are introducing our kids to tools to help them build wealth early and the knowledge to help them do so as well. So thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Thank you. And last, but certainly not least, Willis.
Jill, thank you for having me. So I'm Willis Wilson with ICA or ICA.fund. At ICA, we support underrepresented, under-resourced, often underestimated founders. We do this by providing coaching, capital, and connections to these founders with a mission of closing the racial and gender wealth gap. We do this using two mediums, programmatic support and equity investments. We have a growth fund that writes check up to $1 million for these founders. And then we have a seed capital fund that writes checks on average about $50K to replace that friends and family round that many people from diverse backgrounds don't have access to. Really honored to be among you all today and look forward to having this conversation.
Thank you. All right. So you all see what I'm talking about. They are amazing. So let's get started with the conversation. And I want to make sure that we're anchoring this conversation in our reality. And so we're going to take it back to the beginning so that our viewers can be clear on the starting point of our problems with access to capital. Let's talk about this origin story for a few minutes. Janique, you made a very interesting comment in our prep session that it's not about us. It's about what was done to us. Tell us a little bit more about this backstory.
Jill, that is such an important point. And the reason why it's such an important point is because too often we talk about the African-American community as though the community is deficient. The community is not deficient. We just have not had equal access to opportunity. That opportunity has been stolen from us. So if we go back to, let's say, redlining. Redlining is a systemic challenge that was put in place to prevent Black families from building wealth. And so if we fast forward to today, when we're evaluating a potential business owner for a loan or for investment, and they don't have the collateral, or they don't have the education, or they don't have the credit score, it can be directly linked to that because they were unable to take advantage of the wealth building opportunities through home ownership. They didn't have the equity in their homes that was needed to perhaps pay for college or to use as collateral to take out a small business loan. And so we can't separate this discussion from history. This is rooted in systemic racism. It is what it is, and we have to call it out. And I will also be remiss if I didn't say right now that everything that I say represents my own views and not necessarily those of JP Morgan Chase. I have to get that in there. But the fact that I'm here tells you everything. But yeah, it's rooted in systemic racism. You can't separate the past from what's happening right now. It's what got us to this point. And so there is nothing wrong with the Black community. There is nothing wrong with the Black Americans. It's just a system that we have participated in. And because of that system, we've ended up on the bottom rung of the economic development ladder.
And Janique, you talk about history, but let's be real for a minute. This history goes back to slavery, right? And people who got free labor. There's nothing that's more economic than free. They got free labor. We were the laborers, and we could never participate in the economy. Period. And then, we get to redlining, a whole host of things happen, but, then we get to redlining. And so it just continues to pile on. Sharon, I know, you are knee deep in this, and you talk a lot about the stats and everything around what you do. Please add to this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. And Janique, excellent points that you've made. And I'll even touch on the access to life insurance. I can remember when my grandfather, who was a very successful entrepreneur in Nashville, wanted to just buy a sizable life insurance policy so that his family would be protected in the event of his demise. And he was not able to do that. And that's one of the other tools and vehicles that will close the wealth gap. And as a serious entrepreneur who's launched more than a dozen companies in my lifetime, access to capital has always been a challenge. When you are faced with going before a lender and a loan officer in a bank, and you have to jump through several hoops that your white counterparts don't have to jump through. And once you dot every I and cross every T, then there's always another document or another hoop to jump through. So we have made it in our business. My husband and I are entrepreneurs for over 35 years, but we haven't reached the pinnacle. And so I am here, the moment we get to that echelon where we've reached the pinnacle, that we're going to reach back to the communities and make sure that our African-American entrepreneurs have better access than we had. They'll stand on our shoulders when they get to that success level. And I don't mind that, because this is serious, and that's why we're all here today. So it's been a challenge to go where we've gone, and we still have miles to go before we sleep. But I don't mind it, because we're prepping ourselves for the next generation to come.
And Sharon, think about that. How many generations of people passing down just inheritance, receiving inheritance, and what that does to wealth, and people who are able to use that wealth to help friends and family start businesses, who are able to, put in a little bit of money here or there. Again, to help entrepreneurs and small business owners in their local communities. Yeah, well, gosh, we could talk about
absolutely, Jill.
Point.
Yes. And so many of my white friends will tell me, well, I was able to start my business or to buy my home from the monies that were left to me by my parents or my grandparents, and so on and so forth. And I listen to that and I go, wow, that is amazing. And it's very remarkable, because that's something that we didn't experience much in the Black community. So you're absolutely right. That's what we have to do to change the dynamic of all of these things that have happened in the past. And it takes a while to catch up.
A while? That is an understatement. It takes a lot to catch up, but you know what? We've got to start somewhere. Tanya, let's go to you now. You're a founder who's raised outside investment capital. You're thought of as, one of those ones, which is crazy, to raise more than $1 million. You were in that first group that was highlighted and acknowledged as raising over $1 million. You've now raised a lot more. It's been tough, though, I know, for you. Tell us about your capital access journey, and then talk a little bit about where you were last year versus where you are right now.
I have to laugh, Jill, when you say, Tanya, you've raised a lot of money, because I've raised $6 million in my business, and every single one of my white male counterparts has raised between $80 million and $600 million. And we literally have the best product in the marketplace. And so what is a lot for us, and 6 million is a lot for us, is pennies for them.
And that's when part of the problem, right? Is this perception. And what I said was that you've been acknowledged and highlighted as having raised a lot of money.
That's right.
And that's part of the problem, right?
Absolutely. When we started Goal Setter, we went to venture capitalists and said, and by the way, my background is I have 2 degrees from Stanford in engineering. And so when they say, hey, this is the pattern that you have to follow in order to be eligible for fundraising, okay, well, check. I had that. I was at Nickelodeon where I was an executive and led nickjr.com and noggin.com, launched new products there, launched new products at ESPN. So really was at the forefront of new technology, new consumer products, and had everything in my pedigree that people said I needed to have, and still had a hard time raising money. So I went to venture capitalists and I said, hey, I'm going to launch a kids technology product, financial technology product. And they said, kids fintech is not a thing and it will never be a thing. It will never be VC backable. Go figure out something else to do. 2 years later, however, when white men entered the kids fintech space and started launching teen and tween debit cards, guess what? All of a sudden it became VC backable and they received millions upon millions of dollars. So I thought, okay, wow, well, I guess the environment has just changed. So I went back to the VCs and I said, I guess the environment has changed. You're funding them. So now you should fund me. And then they said, well, now you have 2 well-funded competitors. We couldn't possibly fund you now. And the only time I was able to get funding was, unfortunately, after George Floyd was murdered. Because after George Floyd was murdered, we in the Black community, those of us who had money and chose very intentionally to invest in Black companies, and that would be Kevin Durant and Chris Paul and Robert F. Smith, my investors, they said, we are going to invest in our own and support our own. And we believe that Tanya can help this next generation of kids to close the wealth gap. And then corporations followed them. But it really was Black money that led and said, we believe in her, and got the rest of the money on board. And so, we are constantly stuck in this conundrum of they won't invest in us. And typically in our own communities, we just don't have enough, as we just talked about, to invest in ourselves, to invest in each other. And so we are really tied between a rock and a hard place. We have been able to raise now. We had a seed round where we were trying to raise $3 million. We raised $3.9 million, and that catapulted us. Because with that money, we have now become the fastest growing kids financial technology app in the marketplace, faster growing than any of our competitors who have raised between 15 times and 200 times more money than we have. So that's what happens when you give us $1. We know how to make $1 out of 15 cents.
Absolutely. And kudos to you. I mean, I don't know too many people that are harder working and just out there making it happen, but that's what's required, right? And you do what you have to do. And and especially I will give that shout out to Black women, we do what we have to do when it needs to be done. Now I want to turn the attention, we've talked about the origin story, and here again, I want to be clear, there's a lot more to the problem in that origin story, but because there is so much time spent talking about problems, we want to make sure we're getting to solutions here in this conversation. And the origin story is really, much less complicated than people often make it seem. We have racism, and we have racism, and we have racism. And so moving on, hearing the insights from the entrepreneur's lens, let's talk about some solutions. This seems to be where there's always a roadblock, and what do we do? Willis, I'd like for you to just jump in here and talk to us about the innovative work that you are doing to get capital into the hands of entrepreneurs who really can't find it elsewhere.
Yes, we're happy to speak on this. So it's really interesting when you think about capital, how capital is deployed, what's generally used as a way to determine if a business is lendable. I find that a lot of cases, like Tanya mentioned, African-American founders, Latinx founders, women founders aren't given the same benefit of the doubt that their white counterparts are often given. At ICA, we look at this a little bit different. We like to look at the differences that, underrepresented founders possess due to the different things they've had to overcome as a real benefit in terms of thinking about their probability of success in their respective business industries, et cetera. So when we're underwriting a deal, we look at a business not only from a financial standpoint, we look at the founder, but look at nuanced things about that founder that make them a great fit to operate, run that business. It can be something that's completely unrelated to, the industry they're in. But, if they overcame obstacles and things like that, we give them credit for those kinds of things. We also give them credit for the impact that they're making in their communities, and we meet them where they're at. And if we see them, with a certain area that isn't necessarily the strongest or something that can be improved that we think we can help with, we don't just say, and even if we can help or we can't, like meeting someone on our team, we fill in that gap and we let them know this is some things that we're thinking, and we coach them along that way. So we give them not only so we give them the connections to people in their industry to help them with these specific areas. And then we pair that with capital as well. And so we try, if the intent is there, the idea is there, the founder's there, and we like to also provide capital in addition to connections. And so that's one of the ways. And then another way is thinking about how we look at underwriting for our lending. So we have a loan fund that also doesn't use traditional underwriting terms. We look at the history of the business, their repayment history, like was mentioned earlier, and their profits and revenue to date. So those are some things we're doing at ICA to increase access to capital.
Thank you. Kim, you've had experience raising money, and now you're now you're an investor using all your knowledge and experience to innovate as a capital allocator. Tell us about the Founders First model.
Certainly. Well, as I shared in the introduction, Founders First is my 7th venture, and recognizing having raised any types of capital out there, I started similar to Tanya. I started my career on the tech side. And so really learned a lot of the tech entrepreneur playbook with my 6 companies and wanted to be able to make that available to not core tech companies, because many businesses, for every tech company, there's 5 non-tech or service-based business that can add that tech enablement to make them increase their value in order to increase wealth. And so Founders First was organized with that model in mind. On one side, we're an accelerator, but we focus on specifically revenue generating service-based businesses and put them on the path to grow to be, high 6, 7, 8-figure businesses, which is something I did not once, twice, but, 4 times. And then we also back up that know-how and access to resources with capital. Willis, we will fund up to $1 million. Our check sizes are anywhere from $50,000 to $250,000, but they're underwritten in a model that works for the profile of the borrowers that we work with, the diverse profile. So it's not based on their personal credit profile. It's not based on how much personal or real estate assets they have. And we do also use a similar model like VCs in that we do follow-ons to help them with follow-on capital. And we provide advisory support to help them improve the unit economics so that they can graduate on to 4 different options, be it an employee stock option, traditional debt, private equity, or high growth equity, and have done that with hundreds of companies. And that's the model. And honestly, this is the model that's used with in the Bay Area with a lot of tech companies. If you look at, 500 startups and Y Combinator, which mostly help, a lot of, white male-led companies, we want to be able to provide the same support to companies with people that look like me and want to be able to help them with growth and be able to have them work with people who have done what they want to do and will do everything that we can to make it happen for them.
Thanks. Love that model. The work that Willis and Kim do is amazing. And there are many others out there who are also doing really great work. But this is a big problem that we're trying to address that has been centuries in the making and permeates the systems upon which modern day entrepreneurship is built. Janique, as someone who funds innovation around access to capital, just share with us what you think it will take to change systems and share any insights into promising work that you've seen out there.
So thanks, Jill. And you're right. It really is all about systems change. We can talk about the past as much as we want, but we really need to focus on where we're going in the future. I will say I've been at JP Morgan Chase now for 5 years. And the reason why I came here was because at that time, They went on record as investing in the launch of an African American loan fund and launching the Entrepreneurs of Color Fund. And that's something that I never thought that I would see. I was just like, who's doing this? And so I was very intrigued by that and came on board to the company. And through our philanthropic efforts, we focus on 4 pillars of inclusive economic growth. And one of those pillars is small business expansion. And I have the privilege of, providing capital to lift up innovative methods that people like yourself are testing and proving in the marketplace to really fund businesses that have not been at the forefront of the whole financial ecosystem. And so some of the things that we've been seeing, I have to go back to our Entrepreneurs of Color Fund for a second and really talk about CDFIs and how critical CDFIs are for businesses that are run by people who look like us. They are pretty much the lifeline of the community, and they provide flexible access to capital in a way that banks are not yet able to. It doesn't mean that banks shouldn't, they just haven't been able to. It's not something that they focused on. But I'm proud to say that JP Morgan Chase is looking internally to see what we can do to change our practices so that we can better extend credit in communities, specifically in Black and Latinx communities. So last year, we announced a $30 billion effort called Path Forward that seeks to do just that. 28 billion of that is internally looking. How do we change our business systems so that we show up externally in a different way, so that we are better community partners, particularly in Black and Latinx communities? And I'm proud that they call that out. So it's not something new that we're doing. It is doubling down on where we've already been, being more vocal about it, and really accelerating the work that was already happening, of taking the stuff that we were learning out in the field with our philanthropic partners and feeding it back into the institution, saying, we said that this wasn't possible. It is possible because it's happening. And that's how you change a system. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that debt capital is the only capital that seems to be available to our communities, and it's not even available in abundance. Why is it that debt capital is the capital that is funneled to underserved communities, and particularly Black and Latinx communities, the communities that don't have the collateral that's necessary to get the debt, right? The communities that don't have access to the friends and family capital, the communities that need that friendly equity capital that it takes, that Tanya was just talking about, to get a leg up, to be able to develop their products. We know that there is value in our communities. We know that there are best in class products that are being developed in our communities. And we just heard an example of that. She received the least amount of investment and now has the fastest growing product in her sector. Like, what does that tell you? She was right. We make $1 out of 15 cents. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about, Jill, is our work with you and the work with Eiffel, because what we also have in our communities, we now have a class of professionals that can be accredited investors. Problem is, no one's ever talked to us about investing in that way. We will have individuals that invest money for others, but never thought about investing money for themselves, right? So how do we educate us that have access to capital, and maybe it's not the millions of dollars that have been generated by generational wealth built up over centuries. Like, maybe it's not that, but it is something. And so I think the work that you're doing, that you're leading, that is really equipping professionals like myself, whether they be bankers, whether they be doctors, lawyers, you name it, that can be accredited investors, to now start to pool our funds and invest in businesses that represent our communities. Like, that is a true recipe for wealth building. So wealth building for the entrepreneur, but also wealth building for the investor. And if we can be first money in, and Tanya, you're such a great example of this. If we can be first money in, then that encourages others to invest in us as well, because we're providing that risk capital. We're taking a chance on our own. And so we need more innovation in the equity capital space. How do we get more equity capital to entrepreneurs like Sharon, like Tanya, so that they can continue to grow their businesses and provide the services that we so much need in our community? And who best to create those services than us?
Janique, that could be a whole nother. So clearly, we have to have a whole nother conversation to dig deeper into all of those issues. You couldn't be more right. And again, you just said so much there. So thank you for sharing and those insights. And it is why, we keep Tanya coming back and telling her story and sharing because, she really does represent what this is all about. Sharon, I want to turn to you for kind of another side of all of this. We talk a lot about raising capital and getting capital from banks, right? Raising capital from investors. But there are other forms of capital that are out there, right? Customers, especially corporations and government. And that has been your space for a while, right? Those government contracts. Talk a little bit about the relationship between customers and capital.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you. Janique, that was extraordinary. I was just taking copious notes there. Thank you for sharing all that good information. So with what I do, I am a federal contractor. And we also work with the private enterprise, the Fortune 500 companies. And I was sharing earlier with Jill that one night I saw something come across my email, and it was access to the Beyonce Be Good Foundation. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So I'll go ahead and complete the application. And 3 weeks later, I received a check for $10,000 from the Be Good Foundation. There's monies out there, and it's very unique about how they're coming to you. And the access is there. But as a federal contractor and a HubZone certified firm, we are able to get into contracts that are beneficial to our company on the federal side. But since the George Floyd situation, as Tanya mentioned earlier, I have been probably working on making relationships with at least 10 or 15 major companies in the last decade or so. And it wasn't until the last 18 months that those particular companies came to me and said, okay, so Sharon, what is it that you can provide us so that we can fill this gap in our supply chain? And so we're able to really take a look at the opportunities there. The thing I've always said is that we have to be better. And that's the way I've always run my business. I bootstrapped my business from the very beginning. I self-funded. And I always thought I've got to develop products where there's an insatiable appetite for these organizations, whether we are black, white, green, or blue, that they will buy from my organization, whether just so that I can provide that type of product. And so that's what we've been able to do, to tap into the federal markets and then the private sector where there are gaps in the supply chain for people who look like me. And so we're finally able to get into those contracts, especially during the last 18 months. And I think there's a lot more that's now established that will go on into the future as we work with these companies. But I just admire Wilson, Kim, and Janique for the things that they're doing to bring access to capital to companies like ours. And your work is extraordinary. We have a product right now that's being requested by the U.S. military, and we are working to get that product dispersed out all over the world. And, you take a product that has 5 patents and it's a product that kills COVID-19, and you still have to jump through major hoops, but we're getting there. So there's access there. You have to find it. And there it is spread out among several opportunities.
Again, this conversation is amazing. We still have a lot to get through, and we have a very short amount of time. So let's consider this kind of a speed round from here on out. This question, I'm going to go to a couple of you. What is the one law, regulation, policy, or practice that you feel should be implemented, dismantled, or modified that would help to unlock capital for Black entrepreneurs?
Jill, I'll just start on that one. And listen, I believe that venture capitalists, banks, government agencies, anyone who is investing money in entrepreneurs has to be accountable for how much of that money is going towards Black entrepreneurs. It is absolutely abhorrent to me to see that venture capitalists, as an example, are getting money from pension funds. They're getting money from Black celebrities and entertainers. And guess what? None of that money is going into Black entrepreneurs and the Black entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so we are stranded out here, with white venture capitalists not investing in us, with no access to Black entrepreneurs, Black celebrities and athletes who are often investing in those same large venture capital funds that are saying, hey, come along and be an LP in our fund. And those funds in those venture capital firms are not going to Black entrepreneurs at all. And so I absolutely think that there should be some accountability for, if you are a recipient of government funds, pension funds, funds that have been generated by working class Black people and that are going to be invested on behalf of those people, then you should be accountable for your diversity numbers and where you're investing that money. We can't change the game otherwise.
And I'll add to that. I really think it should be part of the SEC filings, that people should, in their documentation, have to show their spend. And that's how we create that sort of transparency.
Absolutely.
Then there's another thing around donor advised funds and the benefits that people get around that, where that's money that very few of us know how to tap into. There are tax advantages to it, but it's money that is not being made available, accessible to people that are trying to raise money in general. Anyone else have anything they want to add there? Something that should be implemented, dismantled, or modified?
I'll add, Jill, that I really firmly believe that it should be mandatory teachings in high school, at the high school level, or even junior high school level, about money. Let's learn about it. Let's learn about capital. It's extremely important for our kids to understand the value of money and how you can really make money work for you. And one other thing I'll add is that these good faith efforts in federal contracting in states across the United States needs to be dismantled, because you've got multi-millions and millions of dollars in contracts that the prime contractor just has to make a phone call or send a fax or whatever you do to engage the contractor of color. And so that never works out. So that's also a barrier to entry into these high-level contracts that creates a lot of wealth.
I would add to that there has to be an incentive, and perhaps it's a tax incentive for major corporations, especially if you were to tie it to SEC and so forth, to be able to encourage doing business with those businesses under 5 million in annual revenue. It goes back to what Sharon was mentioning, that when you're a large prime and you're generating over $50-100 million in annual revenues, it's a very simple exercise to be able to add yet one more contract. But when you're under that $5 million, and so many of our business owners are under $1 million in annual revenues, and getting that first large contract, that's the thing that really makes it a sustainable business and can be the foundation to be able to get access to other sources of capital, because you have that predictable revenue.
Absolutely. That would be catalytic. Janique.
So I'd just say, I jump in here and echo what Kim is saying. I think we need to lean into capitalism. Also, often, I think what we focus on when it's giving opportunity to Black-owned companies, it's punitive in nature to those that are being asked to provide opportunity. It's meet this 30% procurement requirement or else. It is invest in these communities or else. And we need that. So I'm not saying back away from that, but it's that. And when we think about other communities, how do they encourage investment? They encourage investment through the tax code. So I think Kim is right on point there. But in addition to what she was saying, not just with corporations, but let's modify the tax code to incentivize everyone not to invest in Black and Latinx communities, but particularly and businesses led by Black and Latinx persons.
Mhm.
Right? Because if you encourage investment in Black and Latinx communities, that can be a recipe for gentrification. We don't want that. But if you invest in Black and Latinx owned companies, that then becomes a recipe for wealth creation. And so if we can lean into the tax code and provide some sort of incentives around that, I believe that's the way to go. And then to Kim's point, one of the biggest things that we hear in procurement circles is that, the economies of scale just don't work out when you're looking to contract with a small Black-owned business or with a small company overall. And so if we lean into the tax code and we give them incentives, then that balances the equation. And then that makes it palatable for them to actually open up market access channels for smaller companies. And unfortunately, right now, we represent the majority of smaller companies.
Yeah, and when you
I
talk
mean-
about the incentives, that is a place where maybe there are some modifications that can be made to opportunity zones to really create that true incentive to invest in the Black and Latinx businesses that are in the communities, not just in the communities themselves. Kim, were you going to say something?
I was going to say the comparison. If you look at when you make that investment in those Black and brown businesses that are business owners, 90% of the folks they hire are other Black and brown employees, and they hire them not at minimum wage. They hire them in premium wage jobs. So that continues the savings, retirement, home ownership. I mean, all of those pieces. And so that's why this is so important to driving that economic cycle, why there has to be that encouragement to make that happen. Too often, when we don't invest in these businesses in the form of procurement dollars, you require those dollars not going back into those communities, and it has a much bigger multiplier effect than just contracting with that business.
Thank you. So last thing, really, really quick, because we just have a few minutes left. What is an action that each of you would like to see people take who are viewing this session? Kim, let's start with you.
I would say that for those major corporations that have made some really big promises to work with and increase diversity, the first thing they can do is make certain that they expand the amount of Black and brown founders that they're contracting with. That is the first thing. They have spend right now that they need to make happen. Expand to be it, adding, additional 1,000 vendors. You look at some of the Fortune 50, they could, expand to add another, 10,000 vendors, and it would make a significant difference.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sharon, let's go to you next.
I would say remove the window dressing and show us your numbers.
Thank you. That was direct and to the point. Show the numbers. Tanya.
I would say do whatever you can to close the wealth gap, and every one of us can do something. So if all you can do is support a Black business over supporting another business, support that Black business. Sign up for Goal Setter today. Sign up for every Black business you can think of today. If what you can do is write a check to a Black entrepreneur, write a check to a Black entrepreneur. If you are inside of a company and have the ability to partner with another Black company, partner with another Black company, or influence your counterparts to do so if you're not in that position. Every single Black person has to act like we are part of this solution on a daily basis, or the solution will never be manifested and we will never be in a place where we are truly in control of our own destiny. We all have to be a part of the solution.
Absolutely. Willis.
Yeah, Tanya, you mentioned a lot of the things I would say. The big piece is definitely continuing to support each other and write those checks for each other, provide insight to your community. Another big thing would be to seize the opportunity that's in front of us. There's a lot of capital, there's a lot of promises being made. And a lot of people are actually writing checks. I don't know if this, land of milk and honey will last forever, but we can definitely do a lot to take advantage of what's in front of us and continue to grow and support each other and maintain ourselves in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We all have a role to play, and that is the essence of the message we wanted to convey in this session is that we all have a role to play. And for those folks who would like to know more about how to invest in companies and what that takes, follow us and make sure that you sign up for our mailing list. You'll see information about that at the end of the session. I have to thank all of our panelists. I mean, this was amazing. As you see, we could have gone on and on and on, but our time together today, was short. It's come to an end. But hopefully we can get these folks together again. Hopefully everyone will raise their hand and say, yes, I'll come together again to continue this conversation because it is so important. So as I mentioned, if you would like to receive an invitation to join us at and receive other information about building Black wealth and closing the access to capital gap, please use the link at the end of the presentation to join our mailing list. Thank you again so much to our panelists, Janique, Kim, Sharon, Tanya, and Willis for sharing insights, and to Congressman Payne, first and foremost, for providing the platform for this discussion to even take place. Congressman, I will turn it back over to you to close us out.
Well, Jill, thank you once again for always being the leader of this discussion. You've done an incredible job, which is why we continue to call on you. And it also allows us to have a thread and continue in this conversation. So as you heard, there are several ways we can close the access to capital gap in our communities and empower future entrepreneurs. In the end, it comes down to supporting our own. And it is the people on this panel in your office or at your home who can help others become successful. We need to provide them with the money and mentoring that they need. We need to help them through our social media channels. Most important, we need to buy goods and services from these small businesses in order for them to continue to grow. These are all things we need to do to empower our Black businesses and support Black communities. Once again, I want to thank you for being part of the 7th Annual State of African American Small Business Issue Forum. I want to thank our panelists, Tanya Vancourt, Janique Druces, Kim Folsom, Sharon Reynolds, and last but not least, the brother holding it down on the panel, Willis Wilson, for their thoughts, ideas, and experiences on how we can get better access to capital. And a special thanks once again to our moderator extraordinaire, Jill Johnson. She does an incredible job moderating these panels for us every year. So I hope you enjoyed our discussion, and I look forward to seeing you next year. Good luck and enjoy the rest of the conference.